feel like I need to tap a mic. Is this thing on? I've never done a live on YouTube. Thank you very much. I'm glad you like my videos. Thank you. Hi there. I just decided I would jump on for a minute and try this live thing out. Hi, Tina. Oh, Eco, or Ico. I'm trying to quit smoking because of your videos. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to know that. You can do it. It took me a long time to quit smoking. I smoked for very many years. I smoked 3 packs a day. And now it's been almost 30 years since I quit smoking. So you just got to keep quitting until it sticks. I started watching your videos right after my mom died. I wish I had found you sooner. Thank you. My dad just died on the 19th. I watched so many of your videos in the day prior. Oh, Beth, I hope that was really helpful for you. Yes, my first live. It's my first time on YouTube Live. I would do a Facebook Live if I wasn't hacked on Facebook. Hello, Penny. I absolutely love all your content and your constant insight. Thank you. Thank you very much. Tell people about the ears folding. You know, I have never observed the ears folding. I think that is something that maybe I never observed it because I was never looking for it. But I have heard people say that the ears fold when a person's dying. I just have not ever noticed that before. I noticed other things. Like one of the things that I noticed that was like almost a dead giveaway that somebody was going to die, no pun intended, that they would start to thrust their tongue forward. And whenever they thrust their tongue forward, I knew they were minutes away from death. It was like this little breathing pattern that I just happened to notice. But yes, Beth, if you have pictures of that, I'd be really interested to see that. Oh, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to say thank you. My longtime stepdad entered hospice this year. A bud tender recommended your videos, and you've helped me learn so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad that I was helpful. I'm an older woman, and your videos help me to prepare. Thank you. Oh, that's great. You know, we should all be preparing, even if we're not really old. And I'm no spring chicken myself. I'm 60. And one of the things that I have been thinking about doing is making a video and putting it in my draft folder. In fact, I just emailed my children and I told them each one of them is my legacy person. So my oldest daughter is my TikTok legacy person. My youngest daughter is my Instagram legacy person, and my son is my YouTube and my Facebook legacy person. And that is assuming I get my Facebook page back. Facebook doesn't seem to be very concerned that somebody stole my identity, and they're not really acting on it very quickly. But if I ever get that page back, he'll be the legacy person for that. I was so worried that my mom was dying of thirst. Your videos helped me understand. Oh, whoops. Oh, I missed it. Help me understand that she died of her illness. Thank you so much for that. It's so true that people are very worried that their person who is on hospice is going to die of starvation or die from dehydration. That is a really common fear that people have. You know, we're used to, especially if somebody's really sick before they go into hospice, and they're going to the hospital a lot. It's all about getting nutrition in them, getting hydration in them. And so shifting your focus to a different kind of care is challenging. It's really challenging to do that. But the reality is when the body is shutting down, it doesn't need that nutrition anymore. It doesn't need that extra fluid anymore. And in fact, it can't use that extra fluid, and it's going to cause more suffering for the person than it is going to be helpful for them, because as the body is not able to utilize that food, or they're not able to circulate those fluids, you know, things just don't work right anymore, and those fluids can build up around the heart and lungs and cause a lot of distress for that person as they struggle to breathe with all that extra pressure around their lungs. You've helped me with my anxiety around death and dying. Thank you for bringing awareness and normalcy to the topic, and for such this fun, relatable and educational content. Thank you. I love to lighten up the dark subject of death. And full disclosure, I used to suffer from death anxiety myself. I had severe death anxiety when I was in my 30s. It was crippling for me at time. I couldn't sleep. I would cry, and having become a hospice nurse has really helped with that for a number of reasons. But I really believe that once we get to a place where we can accept death, because it's inevitable and we do have to accept it at some point, we don't have to like it, but we do have to accept that it's going to happen to us. And once we do, it's almost like you can just kind of like put it behind you a little bit and not stress about it anymore. Thank you, E. Billingham. Thank you so much. Katie, I saw part of your question and I'm going to try to scroll back and see the rest. Okay, I've been feeling a pull towards becoming a hospice nurse someday. My problem, I have a very bad gag reflex about mucus. I can handle everything except for mucus. I couldn't clean my grandma's mouth while she was dying, even though I so badly wanted to help her through everything. Is there any way to get over this? You do get used to it. Every nurse has their kryptonite. Every nurse has their thing that grosses them out. For me, it's poop. And I, in hospice, have to do a lot of fecal disimpaction for people who get overly constipated because of the opioids and they're not following our direction to take the bowel meds, and then we have to like literally dig them out. Sorry if that's TMI, but I don't like poop. It just makes me sick, but you do eventually get over it. You're able to do the job. So you shouldn't let that stop you. All nurses have their kryptonite. We all have something that we don't like. My concern about pain and thirst was so hard, the nurse did tell me more IV fluids would cause her pain. True. It was 7 days after ascending and depending aortic dissection. I feel guilty and helpless. Oh, you should not feel guilty at all. You didn't do anything, and choosing to not do fluids certainly doesn't cause them harm. It helps them. And if you choose to do fluids and you don't know any better, you can't feel guilty about that either, because you are not the professionals. We are. You don't know what you don't know. And if we don't do our job and explain things in a way that you can understand them, then it's not your fault if something didn't go right or you made a decision that wasn't right for your person. I believe that even people who make bad decisions about the care of their dying person are not doing it with ill intent. Like, we don't intend on causing our person harm. We're trying to do what we can to make everything be as good for them as possible. Pacemakers, have hospice disable them for your patient. So pacemakers do not need to be disabled. A pacemaker works by strengthening an existing heartbeat. So if a person is dying or dies, that pacemaker will stop working. It's just going to make the heartbeat stronger. That's all it's going to do. But an implanted cardioverter device, or a AICD, that shocks a person when it recognizes an unfamiliar heart pattern. And so that can actually shock a person as they're dying, and it can be very, very upsetting to the family watching that. And so that is something that we usually will disable before the person dies. Yeah, Beth, Dad got shocked 5 times. My mom had grade 4 glioblastoma. She passed less than 3 months after her brain surgery. Oh, so sorry. Glioblastoma is one of those kinds of cancers that can happen to anybody, any age, no rhyme or reason. There's no like genetic predisposition. It's not hereditary, and it just happens. Is it possible to bring pets into a hospice care center? Most hospice care centers will have a pet policy, and those who I have worked for or worked with do allow pets. Usually they're not going to let you leave the pet there. There has to be somebody that's attending the pet, but yes, they can. Mostly hospice care centers will let people bring their pets in. They recognize that pets are family too, and people need to be with their pets. So yes, most places will. But there might be some that don't. And then those are probably not very good ones. Can you give your view on what makes someone good at hospice? I really want to work hospice CNA, and people say I will be good at it, but what do you think makes someone good for it, good fit, etc.? You have to have very good professional and emotional boundaries. You have to be able to remember that you are there to take care of the person and their family. It is not your person. It's not your family. It's not your death experience. You're there to support them. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to be able to go home and let go of that. Professional boundaries to me are always asking myself, if I'm going to do this thing for this person, will I do this for all of my patients? And if the answer is no, then I shouldn't do that. So for me, I didn't go to funerals because if you're a hospice nurse and you think you're going to go to every funeral of every patient, that's all you're ever going to do in your free time. And I have known of hospice nurses who say that they go to all their patients' funerals. I don't know how they do it. Good for them. But I needed to be able to have my time for me. And that meant not going to funerals, because if I'm going to do it for Mrs. Jones, then I need to do it for Mrs. Smith and, Mr. Hanson and Mr. everybody else. And then, pretty soon that's you're spending your free time doing work. And that's not a good way to have a good boundary. How long can an 83-year-old on dialysis last? He's been going 3 times a week for a year. He's got diabetes and already lost a leg and some other toes. You know what? It's really hard to say. Typically, somebody who's getting dialysis on a regular basis and making a decision to stop that treatment and go on to hospice, usually the rule of thumb is 3 weeks. But honestly, I've had people that lived longer than that. People can continue to go and do dialysis for quite some time. And, they usually, what happens is they get to a point where they just don't want to do it anymore. They're just tired. It takes a lot out of them. They're spending all their time at the dialysis center. Do you know if cannabis use is allowed in legal states hospice centers? My dad is a Vietnam vet, and I don't think he'd go if he couldn't use. So unfortunately, hospice care centers are most likely going to be certified by Medicare, which is a federal program. And so no, you cannot have marijuana in a hospice care center because it is a federally funded program and it's a federally illegal drug. So even where it's like in my state of Washington, marijuana is legal. It was legal for medical a long time ago, and now it's legal for medical and for recreational, but we cannot allow it in our care centers because it's a federally funded care center. And so it's federally illegal. So no, we cannot. It's unfortunate, but I want to tell you, most of the patients that I had that lived in their own homes who used marijuana, it wasn't very beneficial to them at the end of life. It did not help a whole lot. How long did it take you to become a hospice nurse? So I did not become a nurse until I was in my 40s. I was 40 when I went to nursing school, and I became a licensed practical nurse first. I was kind of lucky because I really got into hospice fairly quickly. I worked for a year in a clinic, and then it was always my goal to be a hospice nurse. Starting as an LPN, I did not think that I could be a hospice nurse. I thought you had to be an RN. Spoiler alert, you do not have to be an RN. The jobs are more limited if you're an LPN, but you can work in hospice as an LPN. So I became an LPN, and I went to work in a clinic for a year. And then I went, because my pathway that I wanted to be on was to be a hospice nurse, I went to a hospital, to a med surg unit, to start getting some experience there. And then I was laid off after 3 months. They do this cyclical layoff thing with LPNs. Every 10 years or so, they decide they don't need them, get rid of them, and then they realize they need them and they hire them back. But anyway, I got laid off, and I had seen there was a brand new hospice house opening up in the neighborhood, and I decided to go there and check it out. And I was very lucky that I was hired. And so I learned a lot in a hospice care center where you are dealing with death and dying on the regular. If you can get into that as a nurse, then you can go into hospice right away as a new nurse. But if you want to be a home hospice nurse, which is more of a common job, like more available, you need to have some kind of experience first. You really can't just be a home hospice nurse fresh out of school. You should be in long-term care or oncology or ICU or even med surge. But you're working out in a vacuum when you're a home hospice nurse. You are by yourself. You need to have excellent skills. You need to have good skills like putting in catheters, accessing ports, managing infusions, doing wound care. And you also need to have excellent skills identifying a person who's going through the dying process, the different stages of that, and having difficult conversations with the family about what is happening and educating them. What was the saddest death you have seen in hospice? I mean, it's sad when somebody young dies. We did have a young woman at our hospice care center. She was 19 when she got there, turned 20 while she was there. She was with us for 3 months. Young people often last for a long time. And it was pretty sad when she died. But I have to say, most of the time, it doesn't feel, you're not sad that the patient has died. That is the expectation. You know that when you're going in there. You expect that person to die. And if you've done a good job and they have a comfortable death and the family is prepared, it's a job well done when they died. What's more sad, I think, is feeling empathy for the family who has lost their person. That's what's sad to me. And that's always something that you can kind of feel when somebody dies, right? You're sad for the family more than you are about losing the patient. Is it possible to remove your person from hospice if they are still conscious? Only if they are not decisional. If a person is decisional, you cannot take them off of hospice. Hospice is an elected benefit. That person elects that benefit for themselves, and they are the only ones who can decide that they want to be done with it, or what we call revoke it. If they are no longer responsive, or if they're not decisional, like maybe they have Alzheimer's or something that's affecting their decisional capability, then yes, a legal decision maker can revoke the hospice benefit. So let's just say you want to take them to the hospital and get more treatment for them. You can revoke the hospice benefit in that case. But if a person is unresponsive and dying, and that's why they're not decisional, it's not a good idea to revoke hospice, because that's when you really need hospice to be on board to help you out. You are a natural. I can see it in your energy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. My great aunt, who was more of a grandma to me, was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma. Oh, I'm sorry. I helped care for her and it was very hard, but your content has helped me cope and come to terms with it. Thank you. I'm so happy to know that I was helpful to you. That's 2 glioblastomas in here today. Does hospice care differ with different insurance types, like private versus public? Most insurance types are going to follow the same benefits. Sometimes they're going to be a little more liberal actually than a Medicare hospice benefit or a Medicaid hospice benefit. But any hospice program that is Medicare certified has to provide the same levels of care and the same services to all patients, regardless of the payer's source. That's part of a condition of participating in the Medicare hospice program. That doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to bill for that if it's not covered. But we do have to offer the same things for everybody. And most private insurances do have a hospice benefit. You guys are so nice. I think I'm going to start doing YouTube lives more than TikTok lives, because TikTok, there's people that are not nice on TikTok. Hi, Megan. Why do some people go through a bump? I don't know what you mean by a bump. Do you mean a rally? I wonder if you're talking about a rally. I've never heard it called that, but maybe you are, when a person is dying and then they kind of have a little burst of energy towards the end of life. I like this, Shiny. Then just bring him edibles. No one is going to drug test him. You know, that's true. That is true. Nobody's going to drug test. And you didn't hear this from me. If you ever say you did, I'll deny it. But if you brought somebody a brownie and, you know, nobody knew what it was, they wouldn't know what it was. So there you go. Yes to YouTube lives, please. I will definitely, I'll definitely start doing these more often. The only thing about YouTube lives is the comments kind of disappear on me, and then I have to touch the screen and find them again. It's a little bit weird. How do you recommend family deal with the cumulative stress of illness and then hospice? Oh, definitely, you know, lean on grief support for that. Lean on your social worker. If a person is on hospice, lean on the chaplain. You know, you can get emotional and spiritual support from your social worker and your chaplain. Really, really take advantage of that. And then take advantage of the grief support services that is offered after the person dies. Hi, darling. I'm Jimena from Argentina. I lost my dad last year, and you helped me to understand what my dad went through. God bless you. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm happy to know that I was helpful. I believe you can slow the chat down somehow on YouTube. I'll have to look into that. Do you have any horror stories about insurance? I'm a pharmacy technician, and I wonder if it's as frustrating for nurses as well. I don't have any. You know, fortunately, I've always worked for not-for-profit hospice agencies, which I highly recommend for anybody to use. We have charity care available, and if somebody's insurance didn't cover, we would have charity care for them if they qualified. So yeah, I have not. Oh, unfortunately, my dad is in Seattle and I'm in Spokane. So all the services are on the west side and I'm only there a week at a time. Well, that's interesting. I live in Curlew. I don't know if you know where that's at, but I'm actually pretty close to you, Shiny Happy. Oh, and I feel your pain about going back and forth. My family all lives on the west side. I just moved over here. I used to actually be a hospice case manager in Seattle. And I now am a hospice quality manager and I'm semi-retired. So I work virtually from my cabin and I live in the mountains in Eastern Washington. And boy, that's a drive to get over there. Seema Shirwani. Yes, I can give you a shout out. How are you? I'm a private EMT and I work with hospice patients all the time. It's a delicate thing when the family's there, assuring them they won't pass during transport. All the hospice staff I meet are so lovely. It is something that worries us when we are transporting patients who are close to the end of life. Many times we've had to explain to the family it's possible that if we do this, they could die in the ambulance. And usually what it is a person's in the hospital and the family wants to get them home so they can die in their home. And oftentimes they will make the decision to go ahead and just go for it. And if they die in the ambulance, at least they tried to get them back to where they needed to be. I do know the snow issues we've been having, Shiny Happy. I absolutely do. I had to go over Sherman Pass yesterday. I had an appointment for my car in Colville and I needed to go over Sherman Pass and it was snowing on my way home. And yeah, it's been interesting. There's a way for us to support you as well on here monetarily with tips. I've seen it on other lives, so you might want to look into it also. Oh, thank you. I just lost some money on Facebook because some asshole hacked my account. Still, so if you follow me on Facebook, if you follow my, so you have a Facebook profile and then you have the Facebook business page, and they somehow hacked my business page and took over control over it. And now they are posting disgusting pornographic videos on my account, on my Facebook page. So not really my brand. And Facebook is not helping me. They're just really slow about fixing that. I am unsure if you saw my question, but are emergency seizure medications against a DNR? No, absolutely they are not. Managing seizures is symptom management. So yes, we We do often use emergency seizure medications for people. We used to use a lot of rectal medications for seizures, and now we have the midazolam or Versed that's available intranasally, so it can be squirted up the nose. So yeah, no, a DNR means that if a person has essentially died, like they don't have a heartbeat or a breath anymore, we are not going to attempt to resuscitate with CPR. We are not going to try to transport to the hospital and have them intubated and put on life support. That is really what a DNR is. When it comes to managing symptoms, then yes, we are always going to do that. And even if a person is a DNR, if they for example, were in a car accident and they needed medical attention for that, we would not stop them from seeking medical attention for that. Like, it doesn't matter that they're a DNR. We expect people to die from their disease and not from, an accident. Oh, Cheryl, your family lives in Omak and Colville. Oh, I was just in Colville yesterday. I like to go to Colville because it's actually the biggest city near me where I can do a little shopping. Am I scared of dying? I am not afraid to die. I am not excited about it. Like, I can't, like, ooh, I can't wait to die, but I'm not afraid to die. But I can sit here and say that because I'm not dying. If I was dying, if somebody said to you, you've got cancer, it's terminal, you're going to die, I would probably be like really afraid, but not afraid for losing my life, not afraid for the dying process. I do live in a state where medical aid in dying is legal. I would do that if I felt like I needed to. More afraid for my family, my children and my grandchildren losing me. I don't know, maybe they'll be happy about it. I'm just kidding. They might be like, sheesh, finally. I'm joking. Dark humor is big in my family, if you can't tell. How do you handle potential violence when patients are agitated, confused, and not aware of what they're doing? Wow, that's a great question. So, it's really challenging because we don't like to use restraints in hospice. Like, we don't use restraints in hospice. And I myself have been attacked by a patient. He grabbed me by my jacket and started shaking me back and forth. And I had a brand new Grey's Anatomy expensive scrub lab coat on. It was really cute. And he grabs me by my lapels and he starts shaking me. And I just grabbed his hands and I said, "Don't rip my jacket." And I managed to get him off of me. And my CNA that was with me just cracked up and she said, "I can't believe that guy was shaking you like a rag doll and all you cared about was your jacket." But usually what we end up doing is, so we don't use restraints, we don't use chemical restraints, but when somebody is agitated, to the point of violence, especially, then we manage them with medication because clearly they have a symptom of their disease that's causing them to be like that. And so we need to medicate them so that they are calm and not not going to harm anybody. But sometimes it's hard. Like, we had one guy one time who had dementia, and we ended up having to send him to geropsych because he was very aggressive with us, very aggressive. He sundowned, and he uh, he had to go to a psych ward because we couldn't manage him anymore. It was really unfortunate. But typically, if they're like really terminal and they're close to the end of their life, then we are going to use medications to sedate. And yes, lorazepam would be one. Um, but sometimes it might be Thorazine or phenobarbital or Versed. Versed is good because it can sedate somebody, but it's very short lived, and so you can, wake them back up again. My mom just passed, and I want to let you know that your video specifically helped me process her transition. Thank you so much for preparing me for this one. She had a beautiful transition. Thank you, Dee Dee. I'm so happy to know that. Thank you so much. Your channel needs more recognition. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm working on it. I've been getting more people following on YouTube, which is nice. Did home hospice for my mother-in-law. Was such a privilege and beautiful experience caring for her for 12 years with amazing help from hospice staff. Hospice was a godsend to us. We love you. Thank you. Yes, no medications that bring comfort are against hospice, unless they're illegal. Have you ever seen someone get blisters a few days before they pass? I have seen that with somebody that has like really severe edema. I've seen where they blistered on their legs. I have seen that where it got so bad that it blistered out on their legs, and they would have weeping edema where their legs are just leaking fluid everywhere. It's really challenging. What if they don't want to take it while they're agitated? So if somebody is real, I'll tell you another story. If somebody's really agitated, they're not decisional. They're not able to make their needs known. They're not able to tell us, "Don't give me that." They can tell us, "Don't give me that." They can fight us off, but they're not really thinking clearly. So we had a patient at the care center who had cirrhosis of the liver. She was in her early 50s. And what happens with cirrhosis of the liver is that the ammonia levels rise in the brain and people get extremely agitated and can be very combative. And she was combative. She was throwing stuff at us and she was harming herself. She was tearing at her breasts and like literally leaving streaks of red across her chest where she was ripping at her own breasts. And then she pulled her Foley catheter out. It was heartbreaking because she pulled that catheter out. She kept yelling at me and the other nurse saying, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me." And we were trying to tell her that we weren't there to hurt her, that we just wanted to help her. And she ripped out the Foley catheter and said, "That really hurt." And we were just like, "Oh." And we had to take her down. Like the other nurse who was 6 feet tall and the doctor, who was 6'4", held her down, and I had to give her an IM injection of lorazepam, and they had to hold her down until she calmed down, and that is what we had to do to get her to calm down. My dad doesn't like us to move him because it hurts. It's hard to do anyway. So he probably needs some more medication on board if he's experiencing pain with moving. I shared your videos with my father. His wife passed 2 weeks ago. Your stories helped him understand how people need to let go in order for their dying person to finally rest. Oh, I'm happy that was helpful. Mm. Thank you so much for answering my question. My grandfather was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer to the brain over like 2 months ago, but the radiation didn't work. Will continue. It's unfortunate. I'm just going to be real with you. Metastatic diseases, metastatic cancers are really hard to treat. People often end up, on hospice and dying because they are hard to treat. And the treatment for metastatic disease is poison. I mean, chemotherapy is poison. Radiation takes a lot out of a person. People start to look at quality of life over quantity of life. They said he had 2 months to live as of the Friday before last. They gave him rectal seizure medication and a comfort pack, but nobody knew if the medicine was against his wishes. So, yeah, if a person can't decide, then the person who makes decisions for them has to be the one to make that decision based on what they know about that person and what they think that that person would want to have for themselves. So if we called the nurse when he was super agitated and trying to get out of bed and pull his patch off, could we call the nurse and have them give him the injectables that we can't? So if he's getting to the point of agitation to where you can't control him and he's in the home, he probably needs to go to a hospice care center or a hospice on a higher level of hospice care. So that is what we usually do. We usually will have a person go on a general inpatient level of care, GIP, where they can go, and the hospice care centers, in my opinion, are the best because I used to work in them. The best place where you can, it's a nice atmosphere. There are requirements, especially in the state of Washington, about how a hospice house is. The rooms have to be really nice and home-like, and they have to have a place where families can sit privately. I mean, it's really nice. A hospital is a hospital. It's going to be different. But general inpatient care is when a person cannot be managed anymore in their own home, and they need that higher level of care, skilled nursing, around the clock medication to get their symptoms managed. And that is what I did when I started in hospice. I worked in a hospice care center, two different ones for 7 years, and that's what we did is we took patients who had acute symptom management needs, and we would get their symptoms managed with the intent of that person going back home. But most of the time when somebody is having these exacerbated symptoms of their disease, especially when it's cancer, they're usually close to the end of life. And so almost always they would die in the hospice care center. We lost a hospice patient on arrival at the hospice facility in a transfer. I've had that happen too. Thankfully, one time when it happened, the young man who had liver failure and he was the color of a Simpson, he was yellow, and he died in the ambulance on the way from the hospital. He did not have a DNR in place, but thankfully, the EMTs were really experienced. They knew that they were taking him to the hospice care center, and they just basically took their time to not do CPR, and they brought him to us, and he was dead on arrival. And we put him into a bed, and we made him look as good as possible, as good as you can with a dead person. And, you know, we were there for the family. What did I do before I became a nurse? What led me to pursue it? Boy, I did a lot of things. So in my younger years, I was kind of a fuck up, and I drank a lot and did a lot of drugs. Mostly worked in bars. I was a bartender for 8 years. I've done everything from pick eggs. I worked in retail. I've done like a lot of different things. Receptionist. I was a inside salesperson for a print company. I was a pottery instructor one time. Once I got my life on track, I got married and had a couple more kids. I had a son when I was younger that I gave to his dad. I did get him back in my life later, but I got married, and then at that point, I was clean and sober, and a stay-at-home homeschooling mom. And the only work I did during that time was working in an ice skating rink as a skate attendant. And so when my ex-husband and I decided to divorce, I knew I needed to have a real job and a career to be able to raise my children and be a single mom. And so I decided to go to nursing school. And I had had an experience with a relative that was on hospice, and it was a good experience. And I felt like because I had been such a non-contributor to society earlier in my life that I should do something that was, you know, like service work. And I felt like hospice nursing was that kind of work. And so that's really what led me to it. Can a person leave and come back if they're in hospice if they can still walk? So hospice is not a place. Hospice is a type of health care. A person can definitely be on hospice and then choose to not be on hospice and then choose to be on hospice. Now, we do have hospice care centers where people will go. And if they're on a general inpatient, which is that higher level of care, then they cannot leave the facility. They have to stay there because they are needing 24/7 skilled nursing. So we can't let them leave. But if they're on a routine level of hospice, then they could leave. You know, and it depends on the situation. Where do they want to go? How long do they want to be gone for? You know, as far as do they need to actually just discharge out of the hospice unit, revoke their hospice benefit? It's really going to depend on the situation. Thanks for what you do. My mom has been dealing with a number of chronic diseases since September. My mom wanted to end care, but my sister talked her out of it. Now my 90-year-old mom is just sleeping a lot. Aw. So the earliest thing that starts to happen as a person gets close to the end of their life is that they're going to sleep more and they're going to eat less and they're going to become withdrawn, like introspective. Those are the three things that start to happen as people are moving towards the end of their life. Now, that's also really common in somebody who's 90. It doesn't necessarily mean that she's getting close to the end of her life. If she has a terminal condition and she's sleeping more, eating less, becoming withdrawn, then yes, she probably is moving in that direction. But a 90-year-old could sleep a lot just because they're 90. Your answer is delightful. I'm a stay-at-home mom, used to homeschool, but now they're in public school with my severe ADHD. I'm afraid of trying to go back to school until my kids grow out of the house. I can relate. I have OCD. I think now too, as I'm getting older, I feel like I might have ADD. Um, and it was hard to be a mom. My ex-husband was in the special forces. He was a Green Beret. He was gone a lot. So being and that's why I went the LPN route too. But here's one thing I want to tell you. When I started to realize that my marriage wasn't going very well, I said to my sister that I knew that I was just biding my time until the kids were 18 and then I would be able to leave. And my sister said, "What if he leaves you first?" And I was like, "Oh, I never thought about that." So she encouraged me to start going to school. She said, "You should take just one class a quarter and work towards something." At that time, didn't even know what that would be. Just take a class a quarter. You're not doing anything else but staying at home with your kids and homeschooling, which is a lot, but you take a class a quarter and eventually, you'll have accumulated a lot of classes. She did that. It took her 10 years to get her BA, but she did that. And so, ironically, when I told my ex-husband that that's what I wanted to do was start taking a class a quarter, we got in a huge argument about it. He didn't want to spend the money on school for me. He didn't think that was a priority. He wanted to spend the money on some property that his grandmother had. And so we got in a huge fight. And at that point, we had been like in such a precarious marriage anyway. It was kind of like let's get divorced. And then I did end up going to school. So what I'm saying to you is, you don't have to wait until your kids are grown to start moving in that direction. Just take a class. Just take one class. And eventually, years from now, you'll find out that you've taken a whole lot of classes that are going to work towards your degree. I've had excessive guilt since forever. I don't know how to deal with death, but you helped in a million ways. Apparently, I'm weird. I've never learned to deal with death. Thank you so much. You're not weird at all. Nobody learns to deal with death. Death is a taboo subject in our culture. Not only in the US, I've found, but also around the world. It is taboo. People don't want to talk about it. They act like not saying it is the way to avoid it, and it's not. People think if you choose hospice that you're going to die faster, and you're not. You can actually live longer on hospice. People think that if you talk about death, it'll happen to you, and it's not. I mean, it's going to happen to you, but it's not because you're talking about it. It's not weird to not know a lot about death. It's actually pretty normal in our society. I kind of like, when I decided to do this live, it was so impromptu that I didn't get my water. Usually I get a big bottle of water when I'm going to do, because when I'm talking, my throat gets sore. That's from years of smoking. I have OCD and ADHD, but didn't know when I was a high school dropout and drug addict. It took me 8 years, but I got my BA in psychology. You can do it. How nice. Yes, that's awesome. Absolutely. It's more of a challenge, but you can do it. Oh my God. Hi, Nurse Penny. I work in hospice as a volunteer. My mom was a nurse. It was such a formative and beautiful experience for me to grow up with that perspective. Oh, that's great. That is great. My daughters, were, when they were teenagers, they volunteered for hospice because of me working in hospice. So they volunteered at the hospice care center. Not when I worked there either, because I had left that hospice care center and moved on. And they went and volunteered there because it was really close to our home. So it was really cool that they also had that. Thank you for your videos. I think subconsciously I thought of death as a failure, a body failing. Your videos have helped. So many people think that. So many people think that, especially in healthcare. Doctors are trained to cure people, not to let them die. So it is a shift of how we think about things. And death is not a failure. It's a part of life. There is no life without death. They go hand in hand. Can I still work in hospice if I have one drug possession charge? It really depends on what the charge is. If it's a felony charge, you might have a hard time getting a nursing license. That doesn't mean you can't still work in hospice. you could be a social worker, you could be a chaplain, possibly. I would look into it. Um, it's not a felony. So if it's not a felony, then you're in better shape. So I had a misdemeanor charge for, it was an assault 4, because when I was in my 20s, I had a boyfriend who was abusive. And in Washington state at that time, if you were in an altercation with a person that you knew, you were both arrested and charged. So I was charged with an assault 4. It was so I'm 60. So this was when I was in my late 20s, and I do not even remember what happened as far as the outcome. I know I was arrested and I went to jail. I don't remember if I paid a fine. I don't remember if I went to court. I don't remember if I was found guilty, if I pled guilty. I don't even remember any of that. But I'll tell you something, all these years later, anytime there's a background check done on me, that sucker still shows up. And it is embarrassing. It has never stopped me from getting employment. It did not stop me from getting my license for nursing. I disclose it every time, and that is the key. You always have to disclose. When you fill out the paperwork that asks, have you had any, legal issue or whatever, you need to put it on there. You need to disclose it, because if you don't and they find it, then that is what gets you into trouble. So I recently applied to be a volunteer with End of Life Washington. They do medical aid in dying. And as a nurse, I can help people who are doing medical aid in dying by putting in rectal tubes so that they can administer the medications to end their life. So I applied for End of Life Washington to be a volunteer to do this, and they did a background check. Sure enough, it came up, and they said, what happened? This isn't going to exclude. And they didn't actually, I didn't even know they were doing the background check. Usually they'll tell you they're going to do one, and is there anything you want us to know ahead of time? They didn't do that. They just did the background check. And they said, it came up. Can you explain this to us? And I said, sure. And I told them, and they were like, oh, that won't be a problem then. So it's not always going to be a problem, but you need to, explain what happened. My first close death, my grandma. I got there and curled up in bed with her and told her I loved her. She passed right after. 10 years old. I'm glad I wasn't shielded. It helped me grieve. Oh, I love that so much. As a hospice nurse, seeing children climb on the bed with their parents and snuggle with them while they're dying is just, it's not sad so much as it's bittersweet, like it warms your heart to see that. Sorry, but they need to stop bringing up arrests, especially if it was a long time ago. It shows up. I actually even called the courthouse to get it expunged from my record, and there's no record of it anymore in the courthouse. So I can't even go to the courthouse and say, what happened with this? Did I plead guilty? Was I found guilty? What happened? It doesn't exist, but it shows up on the state patrol background check. And I could probably see about trying to get it expunged from there, but I guess I've never bothered to do the legwork on it. It is what it is, and it's never really caused me any problems. So, has working with dying people made you more spiritual? I work in the ER, working towards MD, and seeing people die really had me thinking about life after death. Yes, working in hospice definitely helped me spiritually. It helped me to form a belief about what I think happens after we die, which is something. Not sure what, but I do think that something happens after we die that allows us to kind of exist in a way. And that was through working in hospice that I was able to form that, because of seeing people, deathbed visioning their deceased loved ones and pets when they're dying. That's something that I finally was just like, I can't ignore the fact that this is a consistent thing that we see with our patients who are dying, where they see their relatives who have died. And by the way, like, I have seen some great videos lately. I want to do like a compilation, because I made a video on TikTok that a lot of people have stitched with their own experiences with somebody dying and visioning. And I'm just like, this is so cool. I want to take all these little clips of these people talking about, their person seeing somebody coming to get them. It's really cool. Hey everyone, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for joining me today. I'm probably going to sign off. It is getting to be a little bit late here. I need to. Oh, what's the oldest patient I had? 106. 106. Um, if you are new here, my name is Penny. I'm a hospice nurse. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. I'm actually just getting ready to sign off. So if you've just joined, sorry. This was my first YouTube live today and it was fun. And I'm going to do this again. It was really fun. I am also, so subscribe if you are interested in knowing more about death and dying. I really pretty much stick to the death and dying stuff on my YouTube channel. I share a little bit more about my sober journey and my off-grid living and Pam, my cat, on Instagram. And I'm also on TikTok. And my username across all my platforms is the same. It is at Hospice Nurse Penny. I'm also on Facebook, but unfortunately my page has recently been hacked. So don't bother with that one. So thank you everybody for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a fantastic New Year's Eve. I know I will because my husband and I don't drink anymore, so won't be getting puke sick on tequila and won't feel shitty tomorrow morning. But whatever you do, I hope you have a really fantastic time celebrating, and I will see you next year. Thank you so much for being here.